Hello, Utonians, and welcome to the second episode of my Minecraft University series. In this episode, we're actually going to go through the logic gates that I promised in the first episode. So in the first episode, we went for an overview of what this series is and some redstone basics, so things like what redstone is, how blocks can be powered, levers and torches, and so on. So be sure to check out the first episode. But if you are familiar with redstone basics, feel free to skip the second half where we go through those. So let's get going on the logic gates. So I will just make it day. So without further ado, let's get into... Oh, come back! Oh, whatever, I didn't need to press the button. Let's get into logic gates. Right, so you might be asking, what on earth is a logic gate? Well, before we get onto logic gates, I want to introduce the idea of... Oh, I need that, don't throw it away. That's a very silly thing to do. I want to introduce the idea of a statement. So, let me put down my block here, and I put this sign on. So a statement in computer science is something that is either true or false. So for example, we might talk about the statement the player, i.e. me, right? So the player is on the ground. Okay, so in other words, what that statement is saying is the player is stood on the ground. Well, that statement is true, and the way we're going to represent a true statement is by a powered block, a powered lamp specifically, okay? So that statement is true. However, the statement the player is in a minecart is false, because I'm not in a minecart, not at the moment. So that statement is false. And of course we'll represent a false statement by a block that isn't powered. So computers, you can think of, deal with definite statements. They deal with statements that are either true or false. And so you can imagine that if you're wanting to program a game, you're going to need to want to track statements like the player is on the ground, the player is in the minecart, because for example if the player is in the minecart, that's one statement, and then we can imagine another statement, let me put that down, which is the minecart is moving. Okay, well currently that statement is false, but if I, whoops-a-daisy, if I now, well it's not going to let me place it, but if I hit this button, that statement is now true. And so, because both statements, the player is in the minecart is true, and the minecart is moving is true, then that has a different result to say, so now the player is in the minecart is a false statement, the minecart is moving is a true statement, but I'm not moving because I'm not in the minecart. So what I'm trying to illustrate here is that we can by combining different statements, we end up with new statements, with new facts or new properties that are useful. So let me just again illustrate out what I was talking about there. So we've got two statements. The minecart is moving. Okay, so at the moment both those statements are false, and when what we might have over here is we might have a third statement, the player is moving. Okay, so there's lots of things that could control whether or not the player is moving, but for sure we've just seen that if, whoops-a-daisy, what am I doing? Oh, that'll work. If both those statements were true, i.e. the player is in a minecart is true and the minecart is moving is true, then the player is moving becomes a true statement. And so this statement is logically connected through these two statements here. And so that's what logic gates do. They combine statements to produce new ones. And so hopefully you can start to see that if you were wanting to code a game that involved moving players and minecarts, then at some point you're going to need to describe the relationship between these two statements and this statement. Okay, so we've just gone through a quick overview of what statements are. Now and we've sort of informally introduced what notion of a gate is. Let's be a bit more explicit about what gates are. So there's really three fundamental gates. There's actually many more which we can build up out of these, but for now we're going to start off looking at the three fundamental gates. So the first one that we will I guess build, let me put this in my inventory over here, let's do it over here so we've got a bit more space, is the not gate. Okay, so we'll build that in just a second. Then we have the OR gate, and finally the, I'm not sure if yep, that's fine, the AND gate. And I briefly mentioned the AND gate. If you remember my language, I was saying if this statement is true and this statement is true, then this statement is true. Okay, so we've already started to examine the AND gate, but I'm actually going to look at that last. And I'll explain why when we get to it. So let's look at what the NOT gate is. So let's consider, for example, again the statement here, the player is good. Would you type? Honestly. There we go. Right. So if we consider the statement the player is moving, well, right now that statement is false. Now it's a true statement. Okay, so there we've got our statement, which is true or false at different points in time. We can then consider the negated statement. Okay, so what is the negated statement? The negated statement is the player is not moving. Okay, so a NOT gate takes one statement and produces the negated version of it. So when the statement the player is moving is false, like right now, then the statement the player is not moving is true, and vice versa. When the statement the player is moving is true, i.e. like right now, then the statement the player is not moving is false. Fairly basic, I think. Fairly simple stuff. And that's the thing, that, you know, logic gates, we want to start from something that's very simple, because how we put these together, we can produce very, very complicated stuff, and that's the cool thing about it. Okay, so how do we build a logic gate? So I'm just going to extend the power out because I want to connect this to there via the logic gate. So if you remember, when we looked at our redstone over there, we talked about this idea of inverting a signal using a redstone torch. So oh, okay. Okay, fine. Let me put this on back on over here to one side, because it didn't let me put the redstone down because the sign was in the way. Okay, so notice now, if I remove this lever, because we don't need it anymore, we've got the desired effect. When this statement is true, that statement is false, because this torch takes a powered block, which has come from here, and makes it unpowered, makes a true statement a false statement. Vice versa, when this statement is false, when this block is unpowered, torch powers it and makes it true. So the way we implement, or the way we build a NOT gate using Minecraft redstone mechanics is actually very simple. It's just a torch on the side of a block.